two are very, very special because these are instruments with a double soundboard.
So in an international context, we have to see where we stand.
Yes.
For example, La Ragione.
Yes, Raffaele La Ragione.
Yeah. For example, when he is publishing a new CD, I think it's worthwhile to know also about him and
Of
what
course.
he does. Yeah.
Yes. This is something that I think was. Yeah, this is something I think was not done last. The German school did not do this.
Yeah.
And they were reinventing the mandolin, and then got very good players.
Yes, but there is an international movement.
Yes, but you see, if you go back from the 1960s, and you go to the 1960s, and you see the German mandolin school, it had a tradition, of course, with Konrad Wölki, Behrendt. From that, there were developments which came towards the modern German mandolin, and this is of course good to happen. This is development, but they didn't do it on studying what was before 1940 or 1935. And if they had studied that, they would have seen that the best instruments were already made in Italy, like the Vinaccia, Calace and Embergher. And this is completely neglected, and that is why there were developments in Germany that led to the modern German mandolin. And then I think the idea was that this was the future. But in my case, I discovered that the future was already fixed in 1910 and 20.
This is a wonderful sentence.
Yeah. So for me as a researcher back then, so in the 1980s, so I think I started researching the mandolin. And I went to the museums and I went to private collections. I came with people all over Europe. And I thought the different instruments, and I made up my mind. We played on Albert and Müller mandolins, flatback with my orchestra. And then I thought...
Flatback?
Yeah, flatback, yes. It was before the Seifert, maybe Seifert was already there, but before everybody, in Germany at least, used his instruments. But we were able to get flatback Albert and Müllers. And so I made our first recording with my orchestra at Consort on that. Yes, we didn't use the plastic plectrum, but we used do-it-yourself plectra, because I find the sound of that plectrum better in the brightness of the word. Yeah? So I got some Italian flavor from that instrument. But very soon I thought, this is not my way of thinking about the mandolin. I must find enough calaces for my orchestra. So I collected calaces, but I was not able to get all good instruments, quality instruments, for the orchestra members. And it was about 14 members. It was a chamber orchestra. Yes, I started founding it, I think in the 80s somewhere. And I had the idea that it was better for the sound of the orchestra to have instruments from the same maker. And in Amsterdam we could find a supplier, a music shop, who imported these Albert and Müller mandolins. But they were flatback, so we played flatback mandolins. But then I realized that I wanted to be true to the Italian school. And of course I realized that in Germany the import of the Neapolitan mandolins and other mandolins from Italy had been very strong. Before 1935 or something, it was a booming business for the Italians. but the quality of those instruments was not good. And this is the reason why in German was sought for a better instrument. And this is why Seifert and all those people constructed this new idea with Thomas-stick strings and so on and so on. And with the rubber, or what we now have, blue and white plectra. Of course, this is for me is completely wrong. It has to do with taste, but it also has to do with your ears. And so for me, I decided this is not the way. So I didn't use those plectra, and I converted the orchestra, my orchestra, in an orchestra on Calaces. But then I came across the Embergher.
And it was all new Calaces, or
no, old. I collected old instruments from 1920 and 15 and 5 and whatever. And I still have them, so I can still use if I want. But some of them are very good, and the Classico and so on, and the 900 Brevettata. Those are fantastic instruments. But there are, of course, other instruments from other makers from Napoli, which are not so well, or which didn't survive. But with Embergher, I came across them, and they were fantastic, always good. Of course, sometimes broken, the top, punk, whatever. But that's bad treatment by the previous owners. And and this is all you have to really do your research in this, because Embergher made his own bronze strings, and so if you can try to find those strings, which I did, and then you can go from there, because you have a maker who is building an instrument and who has got the strings. So this goes together. It's very important. Yesterday there was a dear friend, a friend of mine was here, Sebastian Nunez. He visited me. We talked about strings, and he said a very good sentence. He said, the old lute makers, they were able to make strings, and they built their lutes around the strings. You see, this is a very clever idea. Now we make modern copies of lutes, and then we must copy the gut strings, which is a very difficult process, and the concept is so very different, because you've got strings which don't sound so good if the mensure is too long. So you have to really be careful. So if you make a copy of a certain mensure with the bridge there and the nut there, then the string cannot be too good. Yes, it has to be longer, so the bridge has to be there. And so you have to search for the best sound of your instrument. And this is a good lesson, which I understood. With your brains and with your ears, you listen to something. If the instrument is vibrating in the good way, if everything comes out of it. So not too heavy, not too light. And this is something I understood then. So I asked Lenzner and German companies to make those strings, exact copies, with the exception of the second string, because this is a problem string, and I wanted to have it wound. But they were not able to do it at first, but later on they managed. So we have now the package Consort strings, which is after my orchestra, and it's still there.
Yeah, where did you find them, so that you could say, now we make an exact copy?
You find those strings because there are orchestras. Yes, like in Belgium, for instance, like orchestras from Ranieri, or Frans de Groot, or Gamblin, Henri Gamblin, who has the Antwerp Mandoline Orchestra. And those people who were in those orchestras, they had those strings by Embergher. So if you find an instrument, an Embergher, from one of the children or grandchildren from those, you find in the coffin, you find the string package with Embergher strings on it.
No.
Yes, and you have it. Yes, of course. Yes. And so this is the same with plectra. I found fantastic. We play with different plectra. We play from tortoise with the long 2 points in the Roman. But Ranieri developed it into 6.5 centimeter. But in the old Embergher cases, and also in the museum in Arpino, which I have, yes, and they have also on display. It's closed now, but they had on display little plectra. Yes, but not so little, of course. They are still 4.5, 5 centimeters long, two-pointed, Roman plectrum we call them. So this is the research what led us to think about these things. And you talk to people who are from that generation, yes, grandchildren or still players in the old orchestras. And you talk to them and you try to discover, also with the method of Silvio Ranieri in your hand, to find out how those plectra work, because you have to hold them in a different way in your fingers. Yes, you cannot have them like the normal Napolitan triangle, heart-shaped plect, because you hold it like this and the plectrum is in your hand, yes? But our long plectrum would be killed if we do it like that in a fist, because it cannot do it. It's long, but it must move, because every stroke has to be, the plectrum has to give it freedom so it can flip to one or the other side. So if you downstroke, it flips that way, and if you do an upstroke, it flips to that way. And this is the idea to have, and it's very important for sound, the idea to get the sound from your mandolin, what is in it, without doing anything. So we have it on the tip of our fingers, a little bit. You put this here and that there. And if you are playing, you correct by using the fingers more open or inside. But they are free when you play. And always this knuckle in and the thumb out, so that it can flip this part. Yes, it is like holding the violin bow in your hand, that it almost drops down, yes, so that when the weight of the bow is on the violin string, it produces the sound, which is mezzo forte, mezzo piano. The sound of the mandolin, or the violin in this case. If you go to the mandolin and you hold the plectrum very soft between your fingers, you will produce a mezzo forte sound, just the sound of the mandolin. If you go softer, you go even more soft between the fingers. If you want a louder sound, you will press more. So this is the idea of and the approach from how to play with such a long plectrum. Well, on our website I have some photos, yes.
On the Embergher?
Yeah, on the Embergher website, and there are some little pictures where you can see how he looked like. From what I think, he was a very humble person. Yeah, modest but also humble, very friendly person. Yes, I think so. Yeah, maybe soft even. I think so. But with a very good idea about how he wanted his instrument to sound. But of course there was a tradition, and we always think it's Embergher and that it started there, and that of course is not true. For everything there is a prologue or a prelude.
Yeah, you are always standing on the shoulders of your forefathers.
Right. Absolutely. I will get one of the predecessors of the wood of the neck, and the ebony fingerboard. You see, so there's a little piece of wood. This means that it is strange. Normally, a luthier would not have needed an extra piece of wood here. So it's probably a modernization from a design he already had. So to make a raised fingerboard on it. And especially the Roman mandolins, you see here
it's round.
It is round, yes, it is round, and it is here, the ebony wood is very small, very thin, yes, and on the other side it's higher, it's thicker, so it like that, yes, so and that's very nice. So if you have this, you see that your fingerboard here lies closer to your fingers on the bass string, not really bass string, but on the lower strings. And on this, it is closer to your body. So if you put it like this, which is more convenient, yes, you still have the lower strings closer to your hands, to your fingers, than on the higher side. So it's very well thought. And the same with the beautiful bridge, you see, with the slots, all to make things very light. Yes, and what also is very interesting is that it is something that is later left aside, but you see the very broad iron tailpiece, yes, for the 8 strings, 8 pins here. That means that the strings could go in one straight line to the bottom, yes, and not with a very angle, what you see on later instruments, even with Embergher. So I don't like that so much. I like that it is going straight down, because it already has to go from here to there, yes, with a nick inside. So if you do it even more to that side, and from this to that side, more pressure is coming and it's not going anywhere. So if you do it in a straight line, you have more pressure that is equally divided over the fingerboard and over the soundboard, which is Maldura, Giovanni Battista Maldura, and the Embergher. Embergher just started, and probably Giovanni Battista Maldura came into the workshop of De Santis, and he was the thinker. And De Santis was busy with pianos and with other things and selling instruments, but also had a division for mandolins, and that is where this came from. But Giovanni Battista Maldura, he was the thinker, player, so he knew what he was doing, and he developed his instrument, and I will take that now. So this is Giovanni Battista Maldura, a very precious instrument, and you see it's ebony back with silver lining in between, very, very Jugendstil-achtig. Yes, Jugendstil-like. And also what I showed you with De Santis, we have this typically head with the lob, so to speak, and a very, very precious, very beautiful, elegant head. Yes, and you see here, this is an instrument from around a little bit before 1900, and it's probably one of the instruments which was displayed at the Paris exhibition. And you see also here, if you look very good, we have our typical string hinges. So you hang your string on a little pin and then you tune it, and it enables you to fix the broken string in a very short time. Or compare it with Calace mandolin, with the headstock, that is heavy. That is very, very heavy. If you compare it with this is light.
And it works.
Yes, it works perfectly. But like De Santis, you see frets here, and not really extended over the sound hole, but it's still there and it's increasing. Yes, so 27 and so on. This instrument I rescued, so to speak, from Estland. Yes, because it was taken from Leningrad after the revolution by nobility who fled to Estland. Yes, and in fact, before it came to Estland, it was in Helsinki. So they fled from St. Petersburg to Helsinki and lived there, and it was in an estate there. And then it was sold in an auction, and the person who bought it, he contacted me, and I bought it from him. That's the story of this instrument. So it comes really, from a direct line. It's very interesting, and it's very beautiful, yes, of course. Yes. On the side strip by the Maldura, which is typically mark by Maldura. You find it on practically all his instruments. Here we talked about this instrument from Maldura, and you see this typically ornament, and I took here an Embergher Mandoline, number 5 Embergher. And this has the same ornament on the side. It's the only mandolin that I have found with this ornament, but it shows how close those two makers worked in the Roman style. Yes, and here we have an Embergher, which is special. You told something. You said you had read that they did something with the fingerboard, Maldura, and maybe even De Santis. I don't think De Santis so very much. He just fretted the fingerboard like Pythagoras, the idea of measurements. But Embergher and Maldura, they went from what does an instrument make a best instrument, a best sounding instrument. And they discovered that a violin player, yes, that he would intonate higher if he played a solo concerto like the Mendelssohn or whatever. Because playing higher means more brilliance. More brilliance, of course, speaks more. So this was the secret. And this is why if you have a Calace instrument, and before the 10th fret or 12th fret, they are the same. But after here, our frets lay a little bit wider than those by Calace or Finaccia. That's why if you play with an orchestra, you better don't have Calaces and Emberghers and Finaccias in one orchestra. It's much better to have all Emberghers or all Calace, because you have got the best sound in the height. So this is a little bit higher. And you know, the virtuosos, and that is why this is such a nice example. The virtuosos, they needed sometimes high fingering here, so they could play it ta-da-da-da-da-da, yes, and they could go even noch higher. And of course they don't play it like this, but they play it like this with the nail there. So you can, yes, really pin out the pinny tone. And this has the extra fret wood under the second string to a very high degree, and then it goes slightly down to only under the E string. And the nice thing, the fretboard here, and Embergher made even two kinds of this design. So this is the 5 bis, and this is the number 5. And these are very early 5 bis instruments. And the 5 bis was developed so around 1905, when Embergher changed the number 5. And of course you don't see them very much. And these two are very, very special, because these are instruments with a double soundboard. So inside there is another soundboard. So you can make a close-up and you can see it. You can see it like this. And there's another sound hole in it too. That sound hole is situated under the bridge. Yeah. Back and head, you see. And of course both instruments are not with maple backs, but with palisander backs. So we should pay attention to what is needed. Is brilliance and volume, are those the same, or are it separate things? And is brilliance something which has to do with sound quality, and volume only with loudness of sound? Yes, it is much more. Yes, it lies on the string and it goes like that. You don't hear an attack. And this is what we should aim for, when attack and then the release of the string. You should only hear the release of the string. And that makes that it is only possible with a hard material and with a very fast stroke. Yes? And this is why we play on an Embergher with a different kind of idea. It's a technique. But we want to have an attack which is fast and delivers only the tone. And this is something that you must experience and know. You see, it flips down when you, and it goes up when you do that. And that's why we have our 2 fingers out and not like this, because then it's all fixed. You can only, but it should. You see it? You see it flippering? So this is very important, that it is free. So the normal 5 B's. Yes. One is a little bit slower, smaller. You see?
Yeah.
Look. Yeah. More or less, but you can say more. They're always the same. And this makes them ideal for a orchestra. It's one of the successes of my orchestra. That's really true. And of course they have a conductor, and I established, of course, the orchestra, it's my orchestra. But the good thing is that I have a very strong will of how I want music to sound, or to how I want them to play. You see, this is what is needed. If I look at the orchestras we have around the world, and who should not be involved with mandolin playing. And the thing with social media is that everybody can put something on it. That's good. I don't think it's wrong. But sometimes it does not add something. And my goal in my life is to add something. And hopefully that people after me, my students, but also people who like to hear what I have to say, that they can do it better. That's the thing. So that's my aim in life. Yes, this is the mandolin from Vienna. And if you look at it, look, they wanted to imitate the bowl back. And that's why the back, the flat back, is a little bit rounded to this in the length, but it's smaller on the top with the heel. This mandolin has a heel, and it's sloping here. Yes, so they wanted to create the bowl shape because it had to do with the character of the Cremonese or the Milanese mandolin. And this is of course a flat back Milanese mandolin with 6 gut strings. Yes, which was preferred by the Viennese people around 1800. Like Bortolazzi's mandolin with the gut strings, 4 gut strings and tuned in fifths. And this one is tuned in quarters, like the Vimercati. So, and of course it's got this typically head of a guitar. This instrument is fantastic to play because it's very good in sound. Much better, in fact, than many of the Italians. Yes, the Milanese Italian mandolins, but it's also due to this because it has a saddle on the bridge. So a clear departing point from the strings to vibrate. And this has to do with staying good in tune. The Maraffi mandolin, this one is copied by Sebastian Nunez from Utrecht, which I took with me to the museum in The Hague, and there was the original. Ambrosio Maraffi from, let's say, 1790, something like that, 1890. And here you see also the strings are very close to the soundboard, so you play it with the fingers. Yes, like that. And this is one of the developments, was a higher bridge when the fingerboard, the higher fingerboard from ebony came into use. So the strings were higher, and they were higher here. So the bridge had to be higher too, and this enabled plectrum playing. Yes. So these things are all developments which go from the early mandolino, which I prefer to call mandolino and not Barockmandoline or whatever, because it's got many periods, the late Renaissance, Baroque, and early classical period. This was in use during the first half of the 19th century by Vimacati, for instance. So it does not cover only the Baroque period. So it's the mandolino, the mother of all mandolins, the mandola or mandolino. And I say this because the mandola, it was called mandola in the north of Italy. And in the south and in the middle, they called mandolino. And of course, it was the same instrument. Yes. It's beautiful. It's fantastic, and it's very light, doesn't weigh the thing. From a piece, but he is making a kind of soup. And then, and then with glue, he's making it into a plectrum. But of course, this is the way to do it. And it's the wood of the cherry tree, the Kirschenbaum, Rinde, and that's... You see, that's how we should do it when a plectrum is needed to be played. So you have a little piece of the Kirschenbaum Rinde, and you play it with it. So not with a bird's feather, but with it. This is also what Fuschetti says in his tutor. Yes, that you should take this for gut strings. And it's not only for mandolins, it's also for lutes, it's for the Arab lutes and ouds. Yes, we use the typical wood of the Kirschenbaum Rinde. And you know why? It is done because the wood doesn't kill the gut. It stays much longer undamaged. Yes, but if you use a feather, you will cut the gut string. And of course, if you have plastic, you don't have a problem. But if you like to be as authentic, as original as you should be, if you play old music for this instrument, you should, of course, if you want to do it with the plectrum and not with the fingers, it was originally intended for the fingers, but you should do it with the Kirschenbaum Rinde. And then you get the best example. The sound of this is also thicker than the sound of a feather keel. That is... Yeah. Yes.